and we're back in record time.
Well, I was born on the other side of the border. I was born in Saugus, Massachusetts, June 23rd, 1928. And I was born on my grandfather's farm. And from there is where I grew up, on that farm, and I have some wonderful, wonderful memories, and he was one of my favorite people. I had 3 in my life. He was number 1. I graduated from Saugus High School in 1946, and from there, for a couple of years, we worked around down there waitressing at different little restaurants there were. And then I met Bud Morrill, and that's when my love affair with the state of Maine and Harpswell started. We got married, and we went to Limestone because that's where he was working on construction. He was a heavy equipment operator, and he was one of 4 that started on Loring Air Force Base. And there were a lot of wild tales about that junket in my life, but anyway. And then we came down to Brunswick. No, we came to Harpswell next. And we lived there for a while, and then before that, I went back to Massachusetts and had Jeff, and he always never forgave me for having him in Massachusetts. And I told him that I got here just as quick as I could. I only kept him there a week. So anyway, but when I came to Maine, I immediately fell in love with the area, and I never went back home. I'd go for visits, but not anything else.
Where did you live when you were here, when you first came? On the Neck? Or?
Lived in Harpswell.
Yeah.
And in one of Phil Pierce's cottages, which aren't even there anymore. Anyway, let's see, where do we go from there? Had Jeff, and then 7 years later we had Janice, but we had to move to Brunswick for 10 years to look out for Bud's mother. And the minute that 10 years was over, we moved back to Harpswell. And we came and came back to where I live now on Harmony Lane. Well, at that time it wasn't called Harmony Lane, but then they had to name the roads and the, so forth. So somebody said, what are you going to name that where you live? And some thought that it ought to be Shirley Lane and blah, blah, blah. And I said, no. I said, when we first moved down here, somebody asked Bud where he lived, and he said he lived on Honeymoon Hill, on Harmony Lane, right on top of Honeymoon Hill. So I said, I think we were the first year-round residents to live on that little lane, that's what it should be, Harmony Lane. And everybody got along fine, and so that's where it got its name.
When did you start driving as a school bus driver? And how'd you get that job?
Well, I started driving the school bus in 1966. And Louis Stewart, because he and Bud were very friendly, and because Louis, I hesitate to say this, but I'm going to, no matter, and it's still to this day is the same way, no matter what side of town you're from the other side. I don't know why they can't say the islands or the Neck, but they don't. So anyway, Louis lived in Cundy's Harbor, and he did road work too. He had a construction company. And so he and Bud were very friendly. And he said something one day, somewhere we were, something about school buses. And he thought that he might get the contract for the school buses because let's see, 1966. Yeah, that was 1966. And Louis did get the contract. And I said to him, well, when you get ready, if you need a driver, I'd like the job. I had never Well, I'd ridden in a school bus when I was a kid. I had never even been inside of a school bus, never driven one, nothing. So I was working at that time in the summer down at Estes Beach. So Bud called me one night and he said, "Are you anywhere near through work?" And I said, "Just about." And he said, "Well, Louie's bringing the bus over," because they had gone to Lima, Ohio, and brought the buses drove them to Hapswell. Anyway, I said, okay. So I beat feet for home, and I looked out, and here comes this big old yellow bus down my driveway, and it was full of people. Louie and my friend George Barnes, who they were cousins, got together, and they decided that they were going to pull a fast one on me. So they picked up all of my friends and their kids all the way down the road to my house. And one of them bet the other that I wouldn't drive with all those people in there. Louie said, "Oh, yes, she will." George said, "No, she won't." And she did. I went out. I remember going out through the door, and there was a hat laying there, crazy hat. And I took that and popped it on my head. Why I did that, I don't know. But I popped that on my head, and my family came with me, and we got in the bus. And I'm telling you, I thought that driveway was 9 miles long because you couldn't turn around. I had to back out. And all these people in there, I said, "Well, you asked for it, I'm going to drive it." And I did. And we rode all around town, and we ended up down in South Hapswell, way down on the point. And it was Randall's store, but it was run by Coombs. And so Louie treated us all to ice cream. So we all had our ice cream, then we got back in the bus, and I thought it'd be good to go up around the ridge. So I drove up around the ridge and made out fine. And when I came out, I cut the corner a little bit too short. And we go boop, boop. And I said, "Hang on." Anyway, so then I took everybody home. And from then on, I loved that bus. I had, in my course, I drove for 21 years. I drove for 10 years on this side of town and 10 years on the other side. And in the middle, I was supervisor of the whole shebang for 1 year, and I absolutely hated it because I was dealing with parents, and I found that it's much easier to deal with kids than it is with parents. And so anyway, that's how I got started, and it was some of the best years of my life.
How was it in the wintertime? Mm-hmm. How was it in winter? Because do you ever find yourself stuck or?
No, there was never a time that I ever dreaded going to work in the morning. The only part that I didn't like was having to go out and get in that old cold bus. But then that's where husband number 2 came in handy, because he would go out and start the bus for me while I packed his lunch for him. He worked at Lane Construction. That was Lee and Thompson. Well, anyway, no, I never minded the winters because you slowed down. You drove according to the weather. I had a few little scrapes that scared the living daylights out of me, but I didn't do them the second time. One of them was hitting a patch of black ice, and I was headed right straight for a telephone pole, and I just caught that right front wheel in the dirt just in time to save me, and shoo, I went. The next time I went around that corner, I was crawling. So, anyway.
What were the kids like? I mean, did they behave, or were they a
Well,
handful?
As a rule, yes, they did, because they knew that I respected them, and I think they respected me, because I never talked down to them. I talked at them. And it was just, we had a good relationship. They knew that I had a set of rules, and every year, at the beginning of the year, I'd tell the new kids, tell them what the rules were, and this is what we do. And I like to have a good time just as much as you do. But my job is your safety. And I used to say that my cargo was as precious as gold and as explosive as dynamite. And that's exactly what it was. But I had 2 or 3 different incidents with some of the boys. Didn't have too many with the girls, but the boys would get a little boisterous once in a while. We'd have to calm them down, but it didn't take too long before they realized that I meant what I said. And I could have a good time right along with them. But my tool was the radio, because I like country western music, and they hated it. So if they got too boisterous and I would say too out of hand, I'd just switch the radio to country western, just like that. We had complete silence. And we'd ride along like that for a little while. I'd say, okay, have you had enough of that? You know what comes next? Yep. They'd quiet it down. We'd switch it back onto their music.
Well, how long and how did you get involved with the Grange? Because you're one of the longest serving members.
Well, let's see now. We moved to Hapswell in 1951. Yeah. And we stayed down here for a short time, and then we had to move to Brunswick. And I can't remember what year. I think it was I've been a Granger for 70 years anyway. And all of Bud's relatives lived in Hapswell. And that's the only people that I knew. I didn't have any relatives or any family of my own down here. So I got friendly with them, and they all belonged to Grange. And that was the only thing we had to do then. And that was Friday night. We always had Grange Friday night. And it was always a dance afterwards. And it was just different than it is now. It was the only thing to do. And that's where everybody gathered. And it was wonderful. And then in the summer, we had a dance every Saturday night. And that drew summer people came to those dances. And I think there were a lot of romances started in that Grange Hall in those dances. But it was just so different than it is now, because everybody looked out for everybody else. That's coming back a little bit now, but there was a time where that was kind of going by the wayside. Mm-hmm. That happened when Grange, we'll put it this way, TV came. And I think that was the beginning and the end of the social gathering places like Grange, because there was something else to do. But
we had a lot of dinners and breakfasts. Did you cook or did you?
No, we didn't have breakfast then. We used to do suppers. Grange suppers. And we'd have everything. We had lobster stew suppers. We had baked bean suppers. We had, one time I'll remember, there's this old fella in town. His name was Snipe Purrington, and he was a little man. He kind of talked with a like that, you know. So he came in one day when some other ladies and I were out in the kitchen making a clam chowder. And he came in and he started to tell us how to make that clam chowder. And we did it. We did it his way. It was a huge success. We'd made out fine. Then we'd have lobster stew suppers, and I said baked beans. And in the summer, at the dances, we always sold hot dogs, and we had either Glengarry Springs or Pine Springs soda. Soda, not, that's what they called it. And those two places were up on either corner of Jordan Avenue, right off of the Bath Road, and they aren't there anymore. And that's where we'd get our soda. It was in bottles, and it was orange soda, root beer, orange soda, root beer, ginger ale, and I guess cream soda, yeah. And those four were what we had. And as I say, they were all in bottles and in a wooden carrier. And we always sold those. That's what we sold at the dances. And it was just, and we used to have vaudeville shows. And that was way back when you could use blackface, and it would be an interlocutor, and it would be, Sam's father, Arthur Knight, Edmund Ricker, Sam, I did say Sam, Eddie Roy.
Irving Chipman.
Yeah, Irving, thank you. Irving Chipman. A host of men that would be in that, and then the women would do, specialty numbers. And I remember once they talked me into singing A Bird in a Gilded Cage. And I dressed up like a French siren. Oh, didn't I have fun with that song? And then there was Georgie Whidden and Janice Wyman. They did a number together. Those are some that I recall. And it was great because everybody could be themselves. There was no, what do I want to say?
Everybody was on an equal footing.
No, well, this one has more than I do, that type of thing. No. There wasn't anything like that. We were all the same. Everybody was the same. We didn't go too far, as I recall then. I know. Yeah, one time we did go on a bus trip. I was before I drove. We went on a bus trip. They called it a mystery trip, and it was Grange, and we went from here to Friendship. But we didn't know where we were going. There was one person that knew that was the overseer of the trip, and that was a Grange trip, and that was a lot of fun. We used to do that back then. We went to Friendship, and we went on another trip to Gray. There was a Grange over in Gray. And so, stuff like that is what we did. And it was just, I don't know, it was wonderful.
Wonderful fun.
Yeah.
You talked about the Pine Springs, for water. Did you have the Cushman bakery truck or any of the milk trucks, Oakhurst, come out and service the island? Or did you have a favorite store here that you went to?
No, we had favorite store. It was Tondro's Market. It was where we used to get our hot dogs.
Dogs.
And so they had committees then. And you'd have your committee, you do this job, and you do that job. And that's exactly what we did. So there was not, that I ever recall, any bickering, because everybody had their job and everybody did their job, and then we'd take turns. We wouldn't do the same thing all the time. We'd switch around, and it worked out just fine. It was just, I don't know, it was great. And back then, too, they used to have baseball games on Sundays. And we'd have those, and they would always down in, can't remember, the field. What's the name of that field down below me? Now it's hiking. It's just down in West Harpswell. It was across from where Centennial Hall used to be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they played baseball there every Sunday. And there would be teams come from Bowdenham, Thompson, some maybe from the island or from Long Island, and they'd come over. And and everybody took a picnic, the mothers and the kids, and the men played baseball and the boys. Yeah, and that was kind of fun. But that was what we did. We, everybody. I don't know. Everybody just pitched in, and
Got together.
like I don't know.
I have one Grange question about baked beans. Is there such a thing as Maine baked beans versus
Maine baked beans.
Yeah, are they pea
there's
beans? Are they?
a certain way you bake them. Yep, Maine way. As far as I know, that's where I learned.
And which are they? What are the beans? Are they the pea beans or the
No,
big kidney?
no, they can be. Maine baked beans, I think, probably would be yellow eye. Would have been the most popular, but we used to have yellow eye and pea beans and kidney beans. But I think the yellow eye was what you would call Maine baked beans. And then we used to have homemade brown bread. They don't do that anymore. Yeah, that was one job I had. I used to make brown bread. Yeah.
Did you ever participate in the bean holes suppers there over? Well, I know they did.
Did
some
I
in
work on
Mitchellfield.
those?
Yeah.
Yeah,
with the scouts.
Yeah, I did. Willis Allen and I always had charge of the rolls. We had heating the rolls up. We had some fun there. But there again, see, that wasn't Grange, that was Scouts.
Scouts.
And then it kind of went to the fire department, went on from there. In, let me see, 66, let me back up a bit. In about 1961, somewhere after that, was when the first Hopsville ambulance was brought into being. And that was, there were 7 of us on that team. It was Irvin Chipman, Bev Bibber, Beverly Roy Bibber, Polly Bailey, David Sparks, me, Danny McManus.
Minot? Somebody in the Minot?
No, he wasn't there yet. Who was the other one? I said Danny, didn't I? Danny McManus. Did I say Willis?
I don't think so.
Willis Allen.
Okay.
Yeah. And so now, of that crew, there's only 2 of us left, and that's David Sparks and me. And we started out with an old station wagon.
That was the ambulance? That was the ambulance?
Yeah, that was the ambulance. We made out fine. We never lost a person. Then later on, after things got rolling and it got more, what do I want to say, more of a necessity, other people stepped in, and Minot was one of them, and kind of oversaw the whole thing, But it worked. One night, we were doing some training, and we were upstairs in the firehouse. And Irving and Danny we had a new stretcher with new straps on it. And so they had to try it out and see how it was going to work. Come on, Cheryl. Okay, so I got on the stretcher, and they strapped me all in, and we're upstairs. And there's a big, long set of stairs going down. So they got me on the stretcher, and they started out the door, and I said, "Where are you going?" And they said, "Oh, well, we got to try this out and see if it works." And they flipped it right over. And well, you can imagine what came out of my mouth. And Danny and Irvin looked, said, "Yeah, they work pretty good, don't they, Dan? They hold all right." And I'm screaming and yelling. Finally, they flipped it back up. But those were, you could do things like that, and nobody took offense. I mean, you made a good time out of a very serious situation. And we did take some training in Portland. We used to go there. We'd carpool and drive to Portland. And that's...
So you were involved with the fire department for quite a number of years then,
Yeah.
in different ways.
Yeah, different ways. I drove the ambulance and different ways. Yeah. Oh, in fact, auxiliary, we used to do suppers too.
Suppers too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That used to be the favorite thing with the suppers, and they were good money makers. And then as progress came along, things changed.
Yeah. Well, you've always enjoyed a good time. When did you take charge of the parades and the celebration and became the
Well,
lead director?
That was in let me see. Well, it was 22 years ago this year. The fellow that did it passed away. He and his wife did it, and she didn't want to do it alone. And so anyway, Gordon Weil called me, and he said, what had to be done. He said, "Would you be interested in taking it over?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess I could do that." So Kathy gave me a piece of paper with a few names on it, and this is what you do, and I went from there. My two kids always had horses, and so they were in the parade. And I don't know, I stuck with it. I enjoyed it. I loved it. My father was a World War I veteran. My brother was a World War II veteran. My second husband was a World War II veteran. My son was a Vietnam veteran. And I always had a sense, my father instilled it in me, of patriotism. Mm-hmm. And when I was a little girl, I probably was about 5, I can remember very vividly, because my mother was in the auxiliary in Massachusetts. My father was in the Legion, and they all dressed up real, wore their uniforms. And it was really a very patriotic thing. So I was standing there with my grandfather. He had a hold of my hand, and I was watching the parade come. And along came my dad. And my dad, as I say, he was very, very proud. And he was very, he was holding the flag. And I made up my mind I was going to march with my father. And I, just as quick as that, let go of my grandfather's hand, ran out, caught up with my father, stood there, looked up at him. He looked down at me, and he winked. And I thought, I'm in. He's not going to send me back there. So I marched the whole rest of the parade with him. And that stuck with me. And it's been a very, very meaning thing for me. And sometimes a little sad. But it's been a fun thing. I've enjoyed every minute of that. My life has really been a hell of a ride. I've jumped from one thing to another, and I've enjoyed every single thing I ever did. Yeah. I enjoyed my children. I had a stepdaughter, and I had Leon had 5 girls, and 2 of those girls lived with us for a while. And Janice and I lived in I tore the house down that we lived in because it was gone by. Well, anyway, we bought a mobile home, Janice and I did, and we lived in that, and then she got married, and Leon came along. Well, in the meantime, I didn't have a washer and a dryer. So I didn't need it because we would go to town. Janice and I would go together. We'd go to town, get the groceries, and that was right where Hannaford's is now. And then there was a kind of a little mall, and there was a laundromat there, a liquor store, and there was a kind of like a little variety store there. Well, anyway, we could do our laundry and get groceries, and that was fine. Well, then Leon came along, and he started telling me that I needed a dryer. I mean, a washer. And no, I don't need a washer. All right. Well, I'd like to have you get a... So we finally got a washer. 2 days later, 2 of his daughters moved in. Then he started yakking about, you better get a, you really need a dryer. I said, hold it right there, buddy. No dryer. He says, why not? I said, you talked me into a washer, and 2 days later, 2 of your kids moved in. You got 3 more girls out there somewhere. I don't need a dryer. I'm not taking any chances. And I never have had a dryer. The last day of school, I used to tell him, this is funny too. I used to say, no squirt guns, during the week, that last week, but the last day, you can bring your squirt guns. Well, we went round and round with that sometimes because some of those naughty boys would sneak them in. And I remember this one kid, he was just a little, he was miserable. And he was just always, what do I want to say, always at the bottom of everything.
That Dave? Dave wants to know if that was Dave.
No, it wasn't Dave. No. And so anyway, this kid get in the bus, and like I said, I had said the last day of school. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit because when we left Brunswick High School, that was in 67, 1975. Yeah, 1975. And because the kids brought bottles of water, jugs of water, stored it up in the back of the bus. Well, we couldn't wait till we got out of Brunswick High School because that was the last year that we were ever going there. When we came out of the McKean Street and turned to come down towards Hapsel, the water poured right on that bus in the street. But anyway, that was that. But this one kid, he was just a mean little bugger. And he got on the bus one day, and he never carried a duffel bag. Never. But that day he had one. And I said, I know what's in that. So he got up the back of the bus with his duffel bag, and I said, I think I want you to bring that duffel bag down here. And he brought it down. He kind of hesitated. I said, we'll keep it down here. And he brought it down. I said, unzip that. Because I wasn't going to unzip it. I said, unzip that duffel bag. I want to see what's in there. It was in there. It was this great big, one of those super soakers. I said, I thought I told you no. I said, I'll keep that. And do you know that I never gave that back to that kid? I never gave it back to him because he gave me too much of a hard time about it. And I said, you know what the rules were? You didn't comply with the rules? Too bad. To this day, when I see that kid, where's my squirt gun? I don't know.
And how old is he
I don't
now?
know. I have no idea.
Probably 40.
I never gave it back to him. You know that costs a lot of money. I said, I can't help that. And then I had another young man that became a very outstanding citizen here in town. And he made the statement to my son when I started driving the school bus. He said, I'll give your mother just 6 weeks to drive the bus, and I'll make her life miserable. Jeff said, don't push it too far. So one day, we were going in the south end of the Allen Point Road, and there's a dip and kind of a hill. And we start up that hill, and well, it'd been little things this kid had done. And I didn't know that he had said this to Jeff, because Jeff never told me. But there's little things that this kid would keep doing, and he's up to something. So, you know, we kind of kept a leash on that. Well, anyway, that day we were going up the hill, and he opened the back door. And the back door has a very loud buzzer on it. Well, I came about that far out of the seat, and I pulled that buzzer over. I got up the hill, and I knew it was him. And I undid my seatbelt, and I went up to the back of the bus. And the kids always used to say, when you see it coming, don't move. Well, anyway, he sat right there, and I grabbed him right by the front of the shirt, and I picked him up, and I said, just who the do you think you are? I said, do you realize what you did? And I started in, boy. And I said, you come down front. Oh, I'm not going to. I said, oh, yes, you are. And he finally got him down front. He sat down there. I said, do you realize that you jeopardized everybody's life? Well, anyway, we headed out. And he got out at school, and he said to Jeff, gee, I didn't know your mother could get that mad. He says, I told you not to push her. So that night, he didn't come on the bus. It's from school. And we had a weekend, and then we had, came Monday. And here he stood beside the road when I came along. He started to get in the bus. I said, wait right there before you go any further. I said, if you're going to ride with me, it is my way. My way. You understood? Yeah, I promise. And do you know, he ended up being one of my best students.
Did he?
He wouldn't let anybody else do anything. Oh, no, you can't do that. She don't like that, you know. And he went away to college. Oh, I know. He said to my Jeff, he said, do you think she'll call my parents and tell them what I did? Jeff said, I don't know. It's probably not, but I don't know. And I never did. Mm. And he came home from college, and he came down and apologized to me for that. And then when he had a young son, he was in town, and I stopped to see this boy and to see his little fella, and I took his little fella for a ride in the bus. We rode down to the point and back, and that was, so it paid off.
Yeah.
You know,
influenced a lot of people.
Yeah.
In lots of ways.
Paid off.
You talked about Estes at one point. Did you work at any of the restaurants, or do you have a favorite restaurant here, or where do you like to go?
Oh, I like Erica's.
You like Erica's?
I like Erica's and now Pammy's. No, I worked summers. Of course, I worked first at Henry Allen's Seafood. That was up in Apsel Center. I worked there for, 4 or 5 summers. Right. And then I went from there down to Dolphin Marina.
Oh, really?
When they opened, and this Beverly Roy Bibber, she and I worked there in the summer. She was also tax collector here. And when I retired from bus driving, she called me 2 days before I started bus driving. She says, I got a job for you. And I said, doing what? She said, you come over and I'll show you. Well, I worked in the town office, just little stuff. I hated it because I was inside. But I stuck it out for 3 years, I didn't work all the time, it's just part-time. And then, as I say, I worked at Estes and I worked at Dolphin Marina. She and I started there, and then we went to Estes, and then I went from there to the bus driving. Mm-hmm. And then the first summer that I drove bus, I drove for what they called Indian homestay, and I used to drive an empty bus down to Eastport, Perry, to the Indian reservation down there, and I'd pick up anywhere from 30 to 40 Indian kids, and that was run by the Council of Churches in Brunswick, and the kids would come back here, and they'd stay at different homes for 2 weeks, and then I'd take them all back home again. And I did that for 5 years, And then I used to drive for Upward Bound at Bowdoin College, and I drove all over the state of Maine, and I've driven to Massachusetts, I don't know, 4 or 5 different times, and I've driven from one end of the state of Maine to the other, and from east to west. And I've driven to Connecticut. That's as far away as I got. But I never had any problems. Never, just never did.
Do you miss any of the stores that used to be here? I know over on Orr's Island, they used to have the fish store, and they would have the little Dowdy's general store. I mean, there are all these wonderful little stores that have now pretty much gone away, but...
Yeah, no, I worked at, like, the nearest... Did I work? Oh, I worked at Bailey's store. I worked there one summer. That's where the museum is.
Oh.
That was Bailey's store. I worked there for a couple of summers. And we never got over to the other side of town that much. That was a big, long trip, because one time we didn't have the mountain road. We had to go all the way up through Brunswick and down. So a few of those people did come over to Grange. They joined Grange, but not too many. There was about two or three couples that I recalled that used to come over from there. But mostly it was just, well, this town, like I told, I was on the land use committee one time, and there was 3 or 4 gentlemen there from out of state, and they kind of used to say, well, we did this in New York, and we did that in Boston, and blah, 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 And finally I got tired of listening to that, and I slammed my hand down. Wait a minute. That's what I said. Do you fellas realize where you are? And they kind of looked at me like, where's she coming from? I said, you're in Harpswell, Maine. And I said, we respect you. We honor your expertise in your fields of knowledge, but there's only one town in the whole wide world that I know of that's laid out like Harpswell. I said, it's 3 little communities. It's 3 communities. It's one town, but 3 communities. And you'll never find another one laid out like this, because you've got 3 islands on that side of town and a peninsula on this side. And I said, this is one town, one community. Oz and Bailey's is the other community, and Cundy's Harbor is the other community. And we have to respect all those wishes. And I said, I guess they got the message, because I didn't hear any more about, well, we ought to do this because we did that there. No. You're here, and we do it this way here.
Well, they made, this town has had issues with bridges. Do you think the Ewing Narrows Bridge has made a big difference? That's been a positive thing?
Yes, yeah. Big difference. It's kind of brought it together. Of course, we don't even talk about the separation of the town, because that's what they wanted to do at one time. But I never got involved in that because I didn't like politics. And I just wasn't the place for me to be.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, why have you never run for town office? You'd be a hell of a selectman.
No, I don't know. I didn't feel that it wasn't anything I wanted to do. I liked what I was doing. I enjoyed every minute of my life. And I don't know, maybe I was careful in picking the things that I did. But life isn't worth much if you don't enjoy what you're doing.
You a churchgoer? Did you go to Kellogg or to the West Harpswell?
Baptist Church.
Baptist Church.
Yeah, I went to Kellogg, for a little while, but Baptist Church was right across the street, and it was a nice little community, and it's just where I go.
That's where you go. Yeah.
I'm not an avid churchgoer, but I go now and then.
Right. Christmas and Easter, C&Es they call them.
I do believe in the golden rule, and I've tried to instill that in my children and all the kids that have come through my door. Because at one time, my house was just like a dewdrop inn. You never knew who was going to be there for supper.
Yeah. Well, I know you're one of the people who have always hung your laundry out. I mean, that was funny. What do you think about what's going on today? Do you think the islands and the town is getting better because of the mix of people? Summer people have always been a part of the community, but
It's, I call it an open air old folks home, because it's become a senior community. We've lost our young people, and when they closed West Hapsel School, I said at the time, when you close our community school, there goes our community. And it did. Yeah. At the time, I thought, and I remember saying, if they would just close that school, West Hapsel School, for maybe 2 years, and because we were lacking kids, I said, if they close it for 2 years, send our kids over there, give it a trial, and I think it would build up, and you could come back, because you had to pay the insurance, the electricity, taxes, or whatever. Anyway, whether it was open or shut, and that's exactly what happened. But they never did open that school back up, and by not that, there went our community right there, and that's when it started being people coming from other places and buying expensive homes, and so now what you have are a few fishermen, and there's no Sunday school anymore. And no scouts. No. That's gone. That's no Girl Scouts. No. Nothing to bring the community together that way. But I will say, Hapsel Aging at Home is doing a wonderful job. But there again, well, of course I'm almost 92, so I can't do what I used to do.
Is that with squirt guns?
Mm-hmm.
With squirt guns.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, and I know some of the ladies that work on that Hapsel Aging at Home, and like I said, they do a wonderful job, but it's altogether different, altogether. I can't, I don't know, I just can't put that together, because it's not like it used to be. But that's just the way life goes. Life is a constant change, and that's what's happened. It's changed.
Have you ever been involved with the Historical Society, with David Hackett and what he does up there, or with any of the buildings?
Not too much. I've gone up a couple times and sat there on Sunday afternoons, but not too much. We worked together on Halloween, but I think there were 2 or 3 of us, and I think we were a little too noisy for Davy. But anyway, he does a wonderful job. He just does a wonderful job. So we're trying to get him interested in Memorial Day, and I'd like to be in the shadows, and I'd like to ride on the Grange float. That's what I want to do. So next year, when we get going again, I will be in the shadows. I have a young lady all lined up that wants to do it, and I think she'll do a wonderful job. Cool. And I told her I'd give her the papers, and I'd be there if she needed me. But I am going to ride in that Grange float.
One way or another.
Yeah, well, I won't ride a motorcycle then. When I was a kid, I used to ride with my brother. I used to ride with him on a motorcycle. That's how I got hooked on that. And I've always said that I've driven everything there is to drive that's got four wheels, but I've never driven a motorcycle. I love riding on them, but I never wanted to drive one. I don't know why, I just didn't. That's the only, probably because it only had two wheels.
Somebody told me that one of your husbands was involved with the Shriners and
Yeah.
made funny cars.
Yeah.
And you had
Yeah.
a Jeep that
Yeah.
came from Bermuda or something?
They were little, like motorcycles, little motorcycles. Yeah, Cycle Corps was what he was in. And that was another era. We had a real good time doing that. That was a lot of partying, a lot of parades, a lot of fun times there. We traveled all over the state of Maine. Yeah.
You didn't keep one of those little cars for the museum, did you?
No, no, but husband number two introduced me to four-wheeling, and I loved it.
Really?
I loved it. Had my own four-wheeler, had my own snowmobile.
Wow.
Loved it. Yeah.
That's good. What do you think about this whole COVID-19 and the pandemic? I mean, do you think it's going to permanently change the way we live and operate?
I think it will have. I think it'll have a little change effect on us. I hope they find a vaccine. I will be a little hesitant to get back out into social gatherings, for a little while until I know something a little more concrete. But I just wish that everybody would do the simple things that are required of us. And if everybody would wear their masks, wear their gloves, wash their hands, and stay at reasonable distance. I do miss the hugging because I'm a hugger, and I miss that. You ask any of the girls at the polls, they keep a ongoing count of how many people come in that I have to hug. And it's I've gotten in trouble a couple of times because they'd come hug before they voted. No, that's not good. So I had to kind of tell my old friend, if you want to hug, you go vote, then you come hug me. But no, I think that it will, it's going to show somewhere, but I don't know.
I'm just curious.
I'm just hesitant because I'm afraid that if we go back into society, so to speak, too quick, then it's going to come back with a vengeance. And I don't want that to happen. I've spent, since February, I haven't been in a store until, last Sunday, went into Lowe's, and that's the first time I've been in the store since February.
Wow.
No, a little after February, probably March. But I don't know. It's just...
But how long have you been an election official? Because you've been manning those desks as long as we've been here.
I started... I've been in, off and on, I've been in that. First I was a clerk that was on the books, and then I graduated to
Register.
let's see, went from, I know, I'm getting ahead of myself. I started down in the old townhouse with Francis Johnson, and that's when I wasn't driving bus then. That's when I just was doing scouts and stuff like that, because I was scout leader for quite a while. And then registrar. I went on to registrar after that. And off and on, I think I've worked about 36 years.
36 years?
At that, yeah.
Would you like to see us go to a mail ballot? Would you like to see the town go over to a mail ballot?
Yeah.
So versus having the
I think they're going to have to.
yeah.
I don't like to see that. But you know, that too, that again, that was one place where everybody congregated and you visited that day. But that's not like that anymore.
No.
Now, there was a big old cast iron stove, heater stove, where there was always a pot of stew on there. I mean, that place was cold. I'm telling you. We wore boots and jackets and even had, but we always took something to, everybody did. People would come in and bring you cookies. Somebody else would come in and they'd bring a cake, and that we ate all day long. And that was in the old townhouse. Then we moved from there to the Grange Hall. Did we? Yeah, we moved up to the Grange Hall. And there again, we still had the food. Everybody would bring food, and everybody visited. But then it got so that there were a lot more people in town, and in busier times, a lot more things, and it's just not the social gathering place that it used to be. That's all.
Yeah. Well, what are the things, we've gone on quite a while, but what are the things you most cherish about Harpswell that mean the most to you, or the place? Is there any one?
That mean the most to me were the friends that I made here. I have made here. It's an acceptance. They've accepted me. Why, I don't know, but they accepted me. And I've just enjoyed it. I've enjoyed my life. And I can't think of anywhere else that I'd rather be than right here. Because my friend Gert and I, after our husbands died, I'm sure you knew that story. They both died the same day.
No.
And she had a pickup truck and a camper. And the day the men were buried the same day, she came out of the funeral home and I was going in. We met right there and she said, Cheryl, what do you say after we get things straightened out, we go for a trip. We take the truck and the camper and go for a trip. I said, we'll go. I said, I'm on. We went 3 different times. The first time we drove 5,000 miles. Second time, 6,000 miles. The third time, 7,000 miles. We got, because she and Bill traveled a lot, and she'd been to all of the states except Hawaii, and that was it. And she and I snuck in a trip to there. But we drove. They called us Thelma and Louise. We drove. We never had a bit of trouble. And my daughter lived in Missouri. Gert's 2 daughters lived in Texas. So we'd go visit them, and then we'd get that out of the way, and then we went and did what we wanted to do. And we had a glorious time. And it was the best thing that she and I could ever do, because that first year we cried right across the United States. And we got that out of our system, and then we had fun. And it was just, the truckers used to laugh at us because we'd stop in the truck areas, and they were very good, we never had a bit of trouble. In fact, one day we were in Virginia, and we pulled in there, and we went in to go to the ladies' room, and I was talking. I don't know why, why would I talk? Anyway, I was talking, and we went in there, and when we come out, the man that was on the desk called us over, and he said, you ladies from Maine? I said, how'd you know that? He said, well, I heard you talking when you came in. Well, it seems that his wife was from Maine, and she was very homesick. So we weren't supposed to park there because there was no overnight parking. But there was a truck place down back. And this man said to us, he said, if I let you stay down here, will you have breakfast with my wife and I tomorrow morning because she would love to talk to somebody from home. So we did. And that was how we made friends all along the way that way. Like I said, everybody's always known Shirley because she talks. I always said I'd rather break my leg than get laryngitis.
Well, one last question. Do you plan to retire at 100?
No, I'm not going to retire. I'm retired as much as I'm going to retire right now, because I've slowed down quite a bit. I've not backed off, but I've slowed down. And you notice I use a trusty cane, but that's all right. I'm still going.
Good.
Oh, I suppose I better put this thing back on.
Hey ho, roll and go around Cape Horn to San Francisco. Shantyman, sing, boys, pull on the line, and we're back in record time. Now at Bath down in Maine, they built many tall ships. They were paired up and flanked and launched down the slips. The strength of our nation was built on the pine of the mast trees that harnessed the wind. There was schooners and sloops and all kinds of small craft. There were warships with cannon both forward and aft, and the queens of the seas, Downeasters and Clippers, mighty proud men were their skippers. With their hey-ho